G'day Year 11s. I just want to talk a little bit about referencing in legal studies, just to try and give you an example of what we should be looking for. And I know you've got examples of different assignments and different tasks, but I wanted to specifically talk about the referencing side. So I've actually gone to get the example task that we looked at last term. And it looks at the issue of surrogacy in Queensland. So this is a report that's been prepared to show what high standard legal studies work looks like in year 11 and 12. And we're particularly going to focus on referencing. And there's two elements to referencing that I just want to point out. Now these colours are done to highlight which criteria, so don't worry about that. There's two little bits of referencing that happen. I've just highlighted here where it says Priest and Sahi 2016. This is an in-text citation. So this is how you point out that you've used a fact and the source of the fact. The idea being that the more sources that we have that support what we're talking about, the better we're justifying, the better we're using different people's information to create and look at our legal issue. So let's have a look at this. Priest and Sahi 2000, that's the in-text citation where you just put the author's name and the date. Now, if we scroll all the way down at the end, we should have a reference list here. And we'll have a look right at the end. We finish with your reference list. So let's have a look at this one, which was Priest and Sahi. So this is where it actually came from. You got the author's name, the publication, and the title of the article, and when and where it was retrieved from. So we have to put our references together in two ways, within the text and at the end in a reference list. Now there's some more information about how to specifically put these details together, because it's a little bit different from websites to books and so on. It looks like most of these references here are from websites. So the idea is you've got your author, where it comes from, the name of the date, the name of the article, and where you retrieved from. So you can probably copy that pretty easily. I'll just see if we've got anything that's a little bit different. No, I think they're all websites. And I know most of your work is the same. So that gives you a good benchmark for how it should be all organised. So let's have a look at when we should be using a reference and when we are assigning. So let's go back into the text. I'll zoom through a little bit quicker to get back up to the top. Okay. Basically, we want to use a reference where something comes from whenever we've got a fact that's important, or we're putting in place someone's opinion. We're letting someone know where that opinion came from, that information. Let's have a look at this first in-text citation. Let's have a look at a few places where this author has chosen to use one. It comes after this statement here. Recent international debate in Thailand and India involving Australian parents have resulted in laws banning the use of commercial surrogacy by international visitors. So that's a statement of fact. There are laws that have been put in place to ban the use of commercial surrogacy. So to give that statement weight, you need to say where you got that from. You can't just make that up. You must say, where's the source I got that from? And so here we put it in here, the authors and the date, and if we're really interested, we can go to the reference list and look it up. So that's an example of where we use a reference there. Now, a second area which is important to legal studies is how we reference a case. So if we've got a case, we can see the name of the two parties, Groth and Banks, the date 2000, and the court, the Family Court of Australia. And so here they've referred to a case. They've referred to the case and they say that the court found the definition of the word parent should be given its ordinary dictionary meaning. So it's very, very important. That's an important part of the definitions here. That's a fact. So we have to link it back to a reference here. Another sentence that we've got here. The legal duty and responsibility of being a parent is implied in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, 1909, which establishes the principle that the child's interests are greater than the interests of parents or the state. So there you go. That's a statement of fact. It says that this is what the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children says, and so you have to have a reference there. Fodre's 1998, where it is from. Once again, here we're looking at something very specific. Article 35 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child said the government should make sure children are not sold. So it's important to say, where do we come from? That's a statement, that's a fact. It comes from UNICEF 1996. Here we're stating a fact. Adoption is a lengthy process and the number of children has decreased over time. Right, so it's a statement of fact. The number of children has decreased over time. Where's the source come from? Atfield 2014. All of which should be linked up with our reference list. Last thing I want to highlight here as we think about how we're having references. So you've got to think, have I stated a fact? Where did I get that fact from? Where's the source of that fact? Where's the source of that opinion? Where's that source of that expert statement? The other thing that we've got is the use of legislation, and I think they do that quite well here. So where they've wanted to use legislation, they've said Section 11 of the Surrogacy Act 2000 of Queensland. So that's the legislation they're referring to, and you can't just say that in a general term. You've got to be looking for something specific. And they've said that specifically it provides that direct medical and legal costs are the only permitted compensation for someone involved in surrogacy. So you reference that by saying it comes from Section 11 of the Surrogacy Act 2010 Queensland, because that's the source of that information. And that's another way of referencing, in particular I think for referencing legislation, that's quite a good way to go about it. Explain where it comes from and explain what information from there is important. So I hope that makes sense for people who aren't as certain around the referencing process. If you've got a fact, you need an in-text. There's two parts to it. An in-text citation here. Let's have a look at this. This is the one from Atfield 2014. Now, when we scroll down to the reference list, we should also find Atfield 2014, and it's got those elements we talked about: the author, the publication, the date, the title, and the details of when and where it was retrieved from the web search. And so that's a good idea of putting together a table as you're going through your information, making sure you're keeping track of where you're getting your information from.